Some call it tsunami, others call it a big earthquake. What were they talking?
Some thoughts from me, yeah, because like I'm kind of like in that industry. I think it's quite very interesting few weeks.
But they hate cryptocurrencies because gentlemen prefer bonds.
Well, not only you got the right answer, Andrew, I think you sort of made the story more dramatic.
I shot the sheriff, but I did not shoot his deputy.
Are you like the fintech transfer for Poland that Ronaldo was in football for Saudi Arabia?
Welcome to Fintech Uncut, the quiz show with candid commentary on the biggest fintech and financial services news of the week that was. Disclaimer: this show is created purely for entertainment purposes and contains segments of sarcasm, satire, parody, and humor, even if you don't think any of it is funny. The creators do not accept any responsibility or liability for the accuracy of any content shared and reminded you to always fact-check everything yourself. And now, it's over to your quiz master.
Hello everyone, welcome to Fintech Uncut, the quiz show with candid commentary on the week's biggest fintech and financial services stories, with the wise guy, the other guy, and for once, Judge Rita. Very warm welcome, Judge Rita.
Good morning.
My name is Rick Kugelbergs, the host of the day, and this is episode 28, where the wise guy and the other guy are trying to compete to be the best in class in fintech comedy quiz shows. Curious who will win this time? Let's go. Let's start with the first question. We all know we shouldn't shoot the messenger. What it actually means, I did some research, it means blaming the bearer of bad news for being responsible for that bad news. In ancient times, messengers were sent in part official news, and these messages sometimes incurred the wrath of the one receiving the bad news. The sentiment was expressed in the play Antigone, written by Sophocles around 440 BC, for no man delights in the bearer of bad news. Don't shoot the messenger is an admonition to not blame the bearer of bad news, and often used when someone reveals a difficult truth that the listener don't want to hear. Now, why should we shoot the social media messenger? That is my actual question. We cannot shoot the messenger except for one, and that is the social messenger. What do I mean with that?
Getting straight in there. Social media, you can only be talking about the spat between Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg over Twitter, where the one challenged the other one to a cage fight this week, surely.
But not for shooting.
No, not for shooting, but they're going to be boxing match. I mean, Musk versus, who would pay for that? Geez, come on.
I even heard it was cage fight, so it's not like very strict boxing. It's any kind of fight is possible.
Anything goes. I mean, Musk was even saying, let's do it in Vegas, and taking it further. Come on, place your bets. Who's going to win? Musk versus...
I would go and see that. I mean, I would love to see that, but I don't think it relates to the actual message because, I think Rick's asking something about financial services and fintech. And it's before your time, Rick, but there's an old song called I Shot the Sheriff by Bob Marley and the Wailers. It actually came out in the 1970s, and there's another version by Eric Clapton. I shot the sheriff, but I did not shoot his deputy. And what's interesting
It's
about
like, Chris, is your singing kind of like a tradition on this song, on this show? Like I see,
Well,
like you're always singing.
He's taking over from me.
Rick started it, and I do have fintech karaoke on my blog, so if you want to find that, check it out. But there's a story about an American this week called Brady Dugan, and he's formerly the CEO of Credit Suisse. And in fact, in his specific area, Credit Suisse are trying to shoot the sheriff and the deputy because there's an American lawsuit just started by investors who are suing the executive team of the bank for the way in which they ran a toxic culture, which toxic culture seems to come up quite often in financial services and fintech. But their toxic culture was about valuing short-term gains over long-term trust. And according to the investors, the Credit Suisse investment bank was taken over by sharp-elbowed New York investment bankers. Now, what's interesting about this is that Brady Dugan, who's formerly the CEO of Credit Suisse, is now the leader of another Wall Street startup called Exos Financial. And since January, they've stopped paying their people. They've sacked staff without any severance. And so maybe we should shoot the CEO and his deputies.
Now that's why we call you the wise guy.
Bloody hell, that was a long-winded story. I never thought you were going to get to the point there. But point well made.
Me too.
It should have been the right answer, but it isn't.
I can still sing if you want.
You mentioned social media, and social media was shot this week, certainly in Canada, because the Canadian Parliament have approved legislation that forces social media companies to pay their publishers. So that's to do with finance and financial services. So as a result, Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram, have now actually proactively pulled all news sharing from their websites, so they don't have to pay the publishers. So, there's a story that's involving social media messages and finance, and
Shooting.
No?
It's an interesting story.
Let's go to the real answer, but you are getting closer. I can't say that.
If it's to do with social media, then the other one that I think everybody wants to shoot is Rishi Sunak. But anyway, that's another story altogether. But
Isn't it
the big bank
or something? It's, if Joe Biden was talking about him, I don't know.
The big story this week was that the banks have told Rishi Sunak to start forcing social media companies and big tech in general to bear the cost of fraud in the UK, well, globally, really. And they're saying that social media is really hugely responsible for the massive amount of fraud that takes place. And matter of fact, the bank chief was telling the Prime Minister that £2,300 a day was stolen last year by fraudsters in the UK, and he's laying all the blame at the feet of, well, a large amount of the blame at the social media companies not doing enough to prevent fraud.
That is the right answer, isn't it, Rita?
Wow. Congrats, Andrew.
So what does that mean for the score? What does that mean for the scores?
So do I announce the score now already?
Yeah, after every question.
Each question.
Okay, cool. So this one, I think for Andrew, 4.5, like my full point is 5. 4.5 is a quite high score. I think, not only you got the right answer, Andrew, I think you sort of made the story more dramatic. And Chris, 2 for you, because the long story you brought to the table. And, I think,
Can we get another judge, please?
And you can see there, Chris, that your singing did not score you any extra points, so don't try it again.
But
maybe this question works better for Chris.
I shot the other guy. Judge this time.
Wow, amazing what very early quizzes can do to you, Chris. All right, next question. Because, of course, I read 6 articles this week that were relevant for this quiz. And the second article spoke about new natural disasters. And this time, not about global warming. Some call it tsunami, others call it a big earthquake. What were they talking about?
This time, I'll take this one, because is it the collapse of banking worldwide? And the reason I say that is that the Bank of England has just launched this week a new thing called SWES. And SWES stands for a system-wide exploratory scenario. What the hell is that? Well, it's basically, they want to understand the link between banks and non-bank financial institutions during stressed financial conditions, and how those behaviors might work together to shock the financial markets into an implosion. I shouldn't
Shadow
mention
banking aspects, you mean?
Yeah, I shouldn't mention implosion because I had that terrible thing this week of the Titanic submarine.
Yeah.
But that aside, they are looking at whether the market's interlinkage could break the banking system again.
I mean, this is the kind of a thing like a military type of scenario planning and things like that. And I don't think anything like
Are you
this.
talking about that submarine again, Andrew?
No, I don't think anything like this has ever been done before, has it, Chris? And I think it's an exercise that needs to be done.
It is. I mean, there's a guy who is a professor and former chief economist at the International Monetary Fund, Ken Rogoff, who was saying a year ago that there would be a major financial meltdown in 2022. Well, it didn't happen, but we are seeing right now with rising interest rates and the whole nature of inflation that the world markets are really struggling.
But
Well, I
these
mean-
stress tests, they happen every year or so by the ECB as well.
Well, they do the stress tests, but this is different. This is looking at the systemic linkage between banks and non-banks.
Yeah.
The whole financial scenario and what happened in a meltdown.
Very interesting. And definitely worth 2 points, but not the right answer.
Well, I mean, you mentioned debt, and I think there's a debt tsunami, and there's lots of talk about the debt tsunami. There was an article this week in the UK about the cost of living increases, and new data has come out that reveals that around 40% of low-income households in the UK are falling behind in their payments, all forms of payments, and I think we're heading for a massive debt tsunami.
Well, it seems there is no shortage of disastrous news nowadays. Like, it just keeps coming. Chris, what's the other disaster?
Well, I may have confused you. They weren't talking about tsunami. They were talking about a new wave.
Well, on the upside, and so maybe you've got a financial meltdown in the traditional financial system, but I've got an explosion in the crypto system, in that Coinbase have just issued a report saying that 80% of Fortune 500 companies are experimenting with digital assets and cryptocurrencies. And in particular, there's a number of major financial institutions now committing to that space, from Citibank to Citadel. This week, BlackRock, for example, applied to the Securities and Exchanges Commission to get a crypto-backed exchange-traded fund, ETF, in partnership with Coinbase. And there's also another exchange, EDX Markets, that's been launched by Citadel with Fidelity and Charles Schwab. And equally interesting, I thought, was that, again, in this week's news, Ripple has just got a in-principle approval from the Monetary Authority of Singapore to launch a regulated digital payment system in Asia using XRP. So there's a lot of things happening in the crypto space that maybe people haven't seen. It's starting to explode.
Well, what I find interesting is, and Chris, you and I were both involved in financial services way before us. Our histories are long.
You mean way before I was born?
Yes. That I was just saying that politely, and giving a nod to our age there. But I mean, I can remember when Bitcoin was first, and I wouldn't even say announced, when it first appeared, 2009, 2010, people were talking about this new thing that was going to disrupt money, and ever since then there's been lots of, will it, won't it, is it money, isn't it, is it an asset, isn't it, and over just the last few years, our conversations have gone from is it to full-blown recognition of it has value. I mean, I'm still skeptical on that front and still sitting on the fence of how can something, just conjured up out of thin air, have value. But now we're talking about the world's biggest financial institutions investing, and they are specifically using the word investing and setting up ETFs. I mean, exchange traded funds. This is serious financial instruments, and all of a sudden nobody's questioning anymore. They're all in it, and that, I think, is the tsunami that you were referring to there. Is suddenly everybody's taking this seriously. The most, the institutions.
I think what's
but
interesting.
let's well, first of all, like Chris, you got the right answer.
Yeah,
And
he did.
Andrew
Oh,
added on
Andrew
onto it.
was trying to steal that thunder.
No, I wasn't trying to steal the thunder at all. I just think it's fascinating how we, as with a lot of things, it started being completely insignificant, has now turned around where we're talking about trillions of dollars invested, if that's the right term, in fairy dust. Anyway.
I was wearing this shirt purely to hide this shirt, which is just
Oh,
Is that from Nike?
no comment.
Oh, okay. That's really, really good shirt.
yeah, we've got a much better one in our merch.
Yeah.
But I think it's just to sort of some thoughts from me, because like I'm kind of like in that industry. I think it's quite very interesting few weeks. And like Bitcoin is back at 30,000 sort of after a long time, right? And I think it's a very interesting few weeks. There's hunt down from SEC on all these major exchanges. I have no, let's say no comment on that, because it's a very complicated, I think, allegation. But in the meantime, just 1 week, just the same week almost, all this sort of fund, traditional fund filed for, ETF, right? And it seems that the SEC is going to approve it, and it will be the first spot BTC ETF. So it's quite phenomenal, I would say. Well, I'm a purist, so in terms of crypto, so I think, retail adoption, ultimately it's about, self-sovereignty of money, and retail adoption has, already sustained the price of, let's say, Bitcoin for so long. I think institutional adoption is sort of important for the whole sort of the scale of the market. But I don't know what with what I just said, this sort of mix of what's happening in the past 2 weeks. I think it's very interesting.
But wasn't the old objection by the SEC, wasn't that because cryptos are not always perceived as an investment, and by the attitude, by what BlackRock is now doing, they're actually just confirming what the SEC is doing, and in that sense, they're also playing a much more dominant role than what they probably expected to by launching an ETF, because they're actually confirming the supervisor's attitude towards cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is that the SEC right now has lawsuits against Coinbase, Binance, Ripple, and other crypto services because they say that cryptocurrency trading is actually trading in securities in the same stocks, bonds, and options. Whereas crypto is not stocks, bonds, and options. They are technologies and currencies that are outside that realm. And they are treated differently in different environments, as I mentioned, Singapore allowing Ripple and in principle approval to offer a payment service. And I think when you talk to the SEC, they're very sort of, influential and very courteous and dress very well, but they hate cryptocurrencies because gentlemen prefer bonds.
I think one layer of the allegations is like securities, the assets that's traded on these exchanges should be considered as securities, but the other layers of allegations also include, conflict of interest, mingling of customer funds, wash trading and all of that, right? So that's why I said, it's a very complicated allegation. Some of them, are different from the others. But yeah, it's super interesting. Well, Chris, you got 5 for this one.
Wow.
Because I think it's well, first of all, it's a difficult one, I think. And like you sparked lots of discussions here. And Andrew, you got 3 for this one because your add-on to it, like sort of bring back the history. And from your pure, like, I think that's a pure sort of fascination in terms of what happened what changed in the past 10, 12, 13 years. I think, yeah.
Slowly and then all at once.
Chris seems to disagree again. Do you want to be the judge?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, cool.
All right. So Andrew and Chris have the same scores again. Question number 3. A new, not so new, kid on the block is planning an IPO. Can you guess the company?
Is it us? Is it Fintech Uncut? Are we going to IPO? Are our sponsors on board with this? And, no? Come on, Rick, tell me.
Just mention Elon Musk again. As you do in every episode, it seems. I mean, there's a lot of IPOs that have been delayed. In that Zopa, for example, have launched a bank, and they were going to IPO in 2022 and didn't. And they're now looking at 2024. World Remit, that's now called Zeps, was going to launch in 2022 an IPO and didn't. Atom Bank, famous, neobank, started up by Anthony Thompson, a good friend of mine, led by Mark Mullen. Again, in 2022, said they were going to launch a bank IPO and didn't. So I'm amazed anybody's actually doing an IPO this year.
Well, to be perfectly honest, it wouldn't surprise me if it was FTX. I know they're actually bankrupt, but I saw a teardown by one of the Sequoia Capital partners, Alfred Lin, this week, saying that if they were evaluating the business case and their investment from scratch today, they would still have invested in FTX. And I thought, don't tell me that somebody's going to resurrect FTX now and they planning to IPO. Are they planning to IPO, Rick?
No, it's not FTX. I can share it's not WSE Soda either, because that has nothing to do with fintech and financial services.
Oh. In which case, the only one I can think of is there's a very old bank. It's almost 200 years old, called Crown Agents Bank.
Yes.
Through a major transformation in 2016 after being privatized. Are they coming back to the market?
Yep. Well, they are in the market. I actually spoke to them at Money 2020. Pretty interesting story. But they're now so relevant and growing pretty fast that they're indeed considering an IPO.
Is it the right answer?
It is the right answer,
Chris.
yes.
Okay.
But do you have any commentary on that?
Well, not really. I mean, what I find intriguing is we keep talking about transform to be digital in the financial industry, particularly the big banks, and how difficult it is. I think the interesting thing here is Crown Agents Bank did do a complete sort of swerve. And so, when they were privatized, they completely pivoted into digital. And that's where they're looking at getting the payback now, as Rick just said.
Well, I think it's interesting about the model of Crown Agents Bank is that they were the bank of, well, more or less the Commonwealth states. So they have all these more exotic countries where they're active in, allowing them to do this currency exchange with those countries that big banks are not interested in. So they found a very particular niche with almost 200 years of history, which I think is very interesting and balances very nicely against the many young startup companies that try to make a difference as a neobank as well. So in that respect, I think it's a very interesting story. I'm very curious how they will keep growing, because they're now also talking about expanding to Europe, etc. So it's no longer a pure English bank, nor is it a pure government bank. That's all history now. And now it's all a matter of expanding and making sure that they bring value to the shareholder.
I just think they have to watch out for Prince Harry being on your board.
It's possible.
I
Because he's no longer in the royal family.
I think also a bit of the positive news living here in the UK at the moment. We need some bloody positive news for a change. But is their decision to IPO on the London Stock Exchange, as opposed to some of the other UK companies that have decided not to list on the London Stock Exchange and go and list on New York Stock Exchange instead. And maybe it'll attract a little bit more attention and give increased investor confidence if the IPO goes well. So it's going to be all eyes on Crown agents for the IPO, and to see whether or not they hit their valuation, and to see what investor confidence in the UK market is like now post-Brexit.
Total aside, but I was just in the London Stock Exchange myself this week with a Polish entourage talking about how Britain and Poland could create a closer fintech integration, which was a really interesting meeting.
Yeah, well, I think kudos to Andrew for pointing out I think for me, the virtue of this story is, like sort of London Stock Exchange being the go-to choice for tech companies, because lots of them are canceling their LSE IPO and go to other exchanges, which is like, if actually in the news piece it says a recent CNBC report attributed tech companies' unease about UK IPOs to the local investors' treatment of high growth tech companies, as well as to Brexit. I think because I was with listed companies, so I have like sort of firsthand experience towards about the market here. I do think it's relatively conservative, and liquidity is not as strong as some other markets. But yeah, I agree, Andrew. I think this is probably a breeze of positive news for marketing London, for tech companies ecosystem. So I think thanks for pointing out the point. I think the gist of that story. But I think this is actually a really difficult one, because it's a quite old player. So Chris, I'll give you 5 for this one for finding the right answer. But Andrew, you deserve a 4 for this one to point out the gist of the story.
I still have a question, Chris. Talk about old guys. Are you like the fintech transfer for Poland that Ronaldo was in football for Saudi Arabia?
No, I'm Messi.
Okay.
You are Messi, yes.
With a Y, with a Y at the end.
I felt that perhaps you were the first politically flavored fintech transfer to make sure that you can promote the Polish fintech scene after getting that big crowd of followers from the UK.
It's interesting here in Poland. I mean, there's now 300 fintech startups near enough.
Wow.
And millions of dollars of investment going into them, and creating lots of amazing ideas, from factoring invoices, receivables, right through payments to risk and digital ID. So there's a very vibrant market here, and 4th largest economy in Europe. You can't ignore it.
I'll probably be speaking there in October.
Good man. I'll see you there.
Yeah.
Speaking of Messi, just something unrelated to fintech and completely unrelated. Actually,
please not too messy.
The news actually that's like all over social media in China this week was Messi was playing a friendly game for Argentina versus, I think, Australia in Beijing, and there was this teenager, like 10 years old, I think, or something, running into the field and gave him a hug. And
Oh.
and the guards were like running around the field trying to catch him, and finally like five grown-up guys came and finally caught him, and he was like smiling, and it was all over social media.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, it's very sweet.
Story there.
Talk about kids. It shows maturity if you can responsibly raise kids. Which story of the week demonstrated that fintech has outgrown the startup scene?
Is this the fintech that applied for a banking license and was rejected, but didn't cry like a baby at a public conference like Revolut did?
They haven't got theirs yet, have they?
I mean, Revolut's been whinging about the whole thing to do with the UK, not giving them a license and saying they might even leave Britain and relocate elsewhere. They behave like a very sort of disruptive teenager, I think. So they haven't grown up yet.
That is correct. I'm talking about someone that has grown up.
Well, actually, a company that has grown up, I was involved, very heavily involved in its predecessor. It then changed its name, a UK company called GoHenry, which started out as a company called Pocket Money, which I was very heavily involved with when I used to work at Visa. And GoHenry is all about kids. It was recently acquired by Acorn in the US. But there was a great story this week, a report that said that their money missions that they set for kids, on average helps kids increase their savings by 30%. So GoHenry is not just a payments and money management platform and a card for kids, but they do a lot of financial education at the same time, and they gamify it. And these money missions are part of that financial education gamification, and it's having a hugely positive impact on kids. So that's a kid's product that's become a grown-up product and is showing how they can really do good.
Why wasn't that acquisition story in our show?
It was a couple of weeks ago. I actually mentioned it, but nobody heard.
That's a great story, but it's not the right answer. But yeah, I'm very, very moved by the story. Actually, I didn't know they were acquired. I know GoHenry. Yeah, I think financial literacy from early age is very, very important.
Absolutely. And I'm trying to work out the answer. Because when you're grown up, does that mean you're no longer a unicorn, but you're a mermaid or something? Because like you've gone from being a billion-dollar company that's a teenager to being a fully grown company. And the only reason I say mermaid is that the mermaid is the national symbol of Poland and Warsaw in particular, which goes back to a very old story in the 1600s about ship.
1 hour later.
I could tell you the whole story, but her name is Solenka, which is siren in English. And there were two mermaids. One went to Denmark, and the other one came to Poland. But Google it.
and I get blamed for not bringing fintech stories. I mean, there was a fintech fintech story just with a bit of an international flavor about a Brazilian fintech called Canastra this week. That raised $13 million in seed funding. It's a capital markets infrastructure provider. That's linking back to your story, fintech outgrowing the startup scene. But
don't forget the first sentence. It shows maturity if you can responsibly raise kids.
Well, yeah, I was going to say the same.
Okay, then I won't. I'll keep quiet then.
We're building a legacy.
Yeah, but Chris did the same thing. How is that mermaid story related to kids?
Because a unicorn becomes a mermaid.
Yeah, mine at least had fintech there. Well, I mean, if you're going to talk about, raising kids, then you've got to think about all the previous founders of Adyen. There's so many, not founders, the previous alumni. So many people that used to work at Adyen have now gone off and started their own fintech. So it's a fintech raising fintechs. Is that more like it? I mean, They've
Absolutely.
founded something like 17 different fintech startups collectively across previous ADN alumni.
Yeah. And it's actually not an unicum. I know in Belgium, for example, I'm part of the Clear to Pay mafia, because you see that the people who have worked at Clear to Pay, a Belgian fintech, they all went out, but still having very relevant positions in the payments market. So you start to see that from the moment that you have a successful company, you want to do that again and again and again, and use the skills that you gained for doing a lot more. And that's what happens with the ADN alumni now as well.
Yeah, it started with the famous PayPal mafia, right?
Yeah.
So now
The
most of
Alipay
them are,
mafia.
yeah, Alipay, and yeah, I think we actually have a few groups that's you know, like sort of just, you know, previous colleagues, you know, who started businesses, you know, in different areas. Yeah, I think this one was difficult to get, but Andrew, so kudos to you. Chris, maybe -1 for you for going totally off rail.
Yes.
to mermaid story.
But maybe, and I don't know, I'm not a judge, Chris, but maybe
Yeah.
you can influence the score a little bit if you have something to add to the story. Okay.
So Andrew, 4 for you and -1 for Chris. Because, you know,
Yes.
I just
We need to
didn't
get
see.
another judge. I protest.
Oh,
Because I just didn't see how it was relevant, like not relevant to fintech and also not relevant to kids.
but Rita, you don't understand. It's about a unicorn that transforms into more mermaid.
I think you've got something against mermaids. So I think that's what it is.
No. But I think, you know, like we'll have a special award for you for imagination. Yeah. Because you know, think about it. If one day we're calling all these fintech unicorns fintech mermaids.
He's not going to start a trend.
Maybe a fintech mermaid is a fintech startup led by a female. Or
Yeah,
someone
that's
who
true.
identifies as female. Yeah.
Extra point for innovation.
So thank God we don't have Paolo Cironi in this show today, because I bet that after seeing Pizza Hawaii all over Brussels restaurants, this Italian person, not Paolo, want to take revenge and get out as much as possible of his stay in Brussels. That's, of course, my interpretation of the story. But what kind of creativity in the financial services industry did the newspaper Politico find out this week about an Italian banker?
I buzzed first.
You did.
So I think this must be related to Sergio Berlusconi's death, and that when they went through his background and his will, they found that he'd invested in over 100 fintech firms in Italy led by women, but only one of them became a mermaid.
Oh no, you doubling down on your minus points there. Well, you were very specific in your question and mentioning the website Politico, and there was a story on Politico, so I'm sticking to the question. It wasn't Italian related though, it was French Riviera related. There was a story about the UK Labour leader Keir Starmer, who was defending the fact that people had said he was arrested in his youth for selling ice creams illegally on the French Riviera. And actually, it turns out that this was something that happened, although he wasn't arrested, his ice creams were merely confiscated from him. And you said creativity in financial services, and he was being very creative, raising money for his holiday by selling ice creams that he didn't know it was illegal to sell on the French Riviera at the time. So
Good
there we go.
story.
Politico story, financial fact, just no Italians involved though.
I was going to say it's about Italy. You can't talk about France. So maybe it should be a mafia-owned bank. I mean, we just mentioned Adyen Mafia and PayPal Mafia, but the only Italian mafia I can think of are the real mafia.
And do
Tell
they
us a
own
story.
bank? Which bank?
Well, that you can think of several, but I would say it's actually the Bank of Italy. And the Bank of Italy had an economist, which on Politico, the story was about the fact that he swindled the bank out of almost 250,000 euros, basically by dodging expenses and fiddling the books. For example, rather than actually renting out a house, he slept in his office, but charged for rent.
Maybe he was overworked. You don't know that.
Whatever works.
Yeah. And it was in Politico.
Is it the right one?
Yeah.
Yoo-hoo.
Woohoo! I get the points.
Yes.
I get the points, Judge.
This time you stay really on rail. Not like Andrew this time going off rail to France.
One country.
Well, yeah, it's Europe.
Yeah, but yeah, that's the story. So Chris, 5 for you. And should I do -1 for Andrew for going off rail? Just being fair here.
Consistency is key.
Yeah. Okay.
I have one last question, and it may not play in favor of Chris, actually. With the permission of a central bank, a commercial bank issued their own coin. What was so special about that coin that I had the honor of having it in my hands myself a month ago?
Oh no, now you stumped me there.
I reckon that it's that they allowed them to issue a CBDC, but in this case, a commercial bank digital currency rather than a central bank digital currency.
But you can't carry that in your hand.
He said, and because he's thrown me now with the carrying in the hand, because I was going to suggest that maybe they have launched their own meme coin after the latest meme coin, Copium, has recorded a 73% price hike in 7 days, and it's outperformed Dogecoin, SHIB, Pepe, and the other big meme coins. So I thought, oh, maybe a commercial bank has got on this whole meme coin thing has launch their own, but Rick's
That reminds me, Andrew, how far are we with the FU coin?
I haven't had a chance yet to do the FU coin. I think we're going to have to do that one though.
If you've got one, Rick, can you show us?
I don't have it. I had to give it back.
Oh,
But look, nobody uses coins these days excepting for their shopping trolleys. So, who uses coins? I mean, can you use this coin in a shopping trolley, Rick?
No, and the reason why most people don't carry it anymore is because it's not convenient. Unfortunately, this one is even less convenient. It's more of a symbolic value, if I can give you an additional tip.
I've got a very long story about a coin if you want to hear it.
Yeah, we try and
About unicorns become mermaids.
Mermaid coin, that would be a good one.
So is this the crazy story about BDK Card Bank that happened this week, Rick? That you've got some insider information on as a Belgian?
Yeah, but I think didn't you have the chance to look at it yourself?
I haven't actually held it in my hand,
Yeah.
no, but it's the triple-sided coin that they're just trying to use it as a talking point with their customers. Because, symbolically, there's only two sides to a coin. So your choices are either one or the other, profit versus loss or good versus bad and things like that. And the bank wants to get people thinking, what happens if we had another choice, another option? And they're trying to stimulate conversations around the third side being considering what impact your money could have on society and the planet in general. So it's not actually a coin that has any monetary value whatsoever.
Oh, it does, because it's approved by a center. In theory, it can be used as €1, and just doubting anyone would accept it.
Yeah, I'm not so sure they're going to do that. But I mean, their whole point of doing this. Well, do you know how much they're going to? Are they going to sell them? Are they going to issue them? Are they going to? Is it going to be more than just a marketing gimmick, Rick?
Could ask, but I don't think it's going to be more than a marketing gimmick. And yeah, it has three sides to explain the gains that it has for the consumer, for the community, and for the planet. I think it resonates very well with Chris Skinner's latest book.
I was about to
Chris.
throw that in because the whole theme of the book is doing good for, how can we use technology and finance to do good for society and the planet? And that's the question on the third side of this coin that BDK has asked. And what I find interesting is that I used to work for a company, it's called Unisys, it's still around, an American company, and the leadership launched a program called the three-legged stool, and the stool was basically representing three legs: customers, employees, and shareholders. And we all got badges and t-shirts, but when
shareholders,
sorry,
shareholders.
But we all got the badges and the t-shirts for the three-legged stool. But when they brought it to Europe, the first comment from most of the Europeans was, do you know that the European Commission has banned three-legged stools? I didn't know this, but it's illegal to have a three-legged stool in Europe.
Really?
Sorry, why? Now there is one that
You might fall off. You need four-legged stools.
It's like some of the Italian cheeses that are prohibited these days because it's risks not to be healthy. Those things happen if you have too much.
I've got a three-legged stool next to me here, so maybe in Poland it's not illegal. I don't know.
Or you've got contraband goods there, Chris.
Or maybe I've just got good stools, which is something to do with the old way of looking at, anyway, stuff.
Cutting the story short, Chris has learned his lessons. But I think, at least the preview story you bring on this time is like quite relevant, like in terms of like trilogy of sort of the values. And yeah, so well, congrats, Andrew, for getting the answer right, and Chris for giving us an enticing, relevant story. So Andrew, 4 for you, 2.5 for you, Chris.
So that means that we have a winner, a clear winner this time.
Do we? What's the overall score? I lost count with all the pluses and minuses and everything that's going on.
Minus is always at the other side, Andrew.
No, I got a minus.
Let me see. I have a Excel sheet here. Hold on a sec.
That's reminding us of Judge Wasim Mushtaq, who had a very complex score chart and Excel spreadsheet.
It does show that Rita works in finance.
And well, in the meantime, while I count, maybe Chris, you can give us another story.
No.
Don't encourage him. Don't encourage.
You know what? So the total score comes to 18.5 for both of you.
Really? A tie.
It's a draw. Yeah, it's a tie.
Oh, no winner.
Isn't that the first time, Andrew?
I think that's the first time we've got a tie, and completely unexpected, because I never ever keep track as it goes. So that was yay.
Yay.
All right.
Congrats to both of you.
Does that mean that we were both equally irrelevant, Chris?
No, it means that Rita can come back.
All right.
Well, you don't like all this minus and 0.5?
No, it's good. Keeps us on our toes.
I think, Rita, you did a very good job here.
Sorry, because I said you can come back, Rita, do I get an extra 0.5?
Too late.
Anyway,
Wow.
You should stop influencing the judge. The scores are final. And I would like to thank Rita a lot for those scores and also for your contributions in this show, Rita. And I hope that we can welcome you soon again.
Thank you.
I would also like to thank our listeners and our audience for watching the show, and I cannot wait for more international news coming soon. If you like the show, make sure to register on our website for the newsletter or follow your favorite podcast channel, to make sure that you are the first to know about any new episode. As a big fan, make sure you look at the merchandise, because there's a lot of fun stuff in there, like this, my mug, or like Andrew's t-shirt, or a lot more. So that was the 28th episode of Fintech Uncut, and we hope to entertain you, your colleagues, your friends, your connections and followers, your rabbits, cats, dogs, and many more very soon again. That was it for this week. Bye-bye.